Hello viewers, I welcome you to Padre Okoromi channel. I want to use this medium to thank all of you who have been subscribing so far to my YouTube channel. I thank you and I pray God continuously bless you. And for those who are just getting to view the channel for the very first time through this video, please do not forget to press the subscription button and also to press the notification bell so that each time I upload a new video, you can have access to know what I'm talking about. Today, I am going to be discussing a topic that is classical in as much as what politics is all about is a topic that we cannot do without. I target the fall of the United States of America as the world power, or the fall of the United States as the most powerful country on earth. Anyhow, but what I intend to bring about in this video is to explain a philosophical belief which was enshrined in the book of a popular political philosopher in the person of Francis Fukuyama. In his book, The End of History and the Last Man, which was written in 1992, Francis Fukuyama controversially asserts that the end of the Cold War marks the end of history, that is, the triumph of liberal democracy. And there is, when we talk about liberal democracy in the world, we are talking about just one nation on earth that has continuously upheld liberal democracy. That liberal democracy or liberalism is part and parcel of their life. We are talking about no other people but talking about the United States of America, the powerhouse of the world, or the most powerful nation on earth, or the most powerful country on earth. Also, in that book, The End of History and the Last Man, Francis Fukuyama also asserts or also announced that the final defeat of communism, or the final defeat of the Soviet Union in the dismantling of the Berlin Wall, marks a new beginning in world history, or marks the beginning in politics in the world, which will direct humanity to a conceivable perfection of human ideology and institution. It was a perfect ideology, and even the Americans themselves, the US citizens themselves, they live in that ideology, because the US, when you talk about the US in the world, there is no other country that contends with them. It is a given to them. But right from the time that Fukuyama made this assertion, history, which is the coherent and directional transformation of human society, has come to make us know that liberal democracy has continued to dominate, as the United States of America is playing a leading role. Yes, we can see that everywhere. There is no part of the world that the United States of America is not dominating. There is no part of the world that the United States does not have a military presence. Yes, when I say a military presence, there is no part of the world, even if they are not directly present inside the country, the water bodies of the country, or the water bodies of the country, the water bodies of the continent, they have their military presence. And up there in the sky, they have their air force with their jets always up there. trying to see one or two things to see how to control the world. The United States has been playing a leading role when it comes to upholding liberal democracy. And we know, looking at it very well, we come to discover that liberal democracy and those who live in countries where liberal democracy is practiced, they enjoy liberty, equality, economic development because of the capitalist economy system that is introduced in a liberal democracy, and there is political stability. If we take the United States as a case study, you know what the citizens there, what they enjoy. Now, but history too has also made us to know that liberal democracy, is it really going to be the final form of government that everybody, every nation on earth will embrace? Is there not going to be a form of human infringement when it comes to liberal democracy itself? Is human being not going to try to interpret liberal democracy to suit them, especially when there are dictatorship in certain government? Amidst these advantages of liberal democracy, as posited by Francis Fukuyama, a question seems to bother the mind. And what is that bothers the mind? Will liberal democracy survive the 21st century? Will the US continue to maintain its position as the world power? Because there are so many things that gives the US. Or will the US continuously play the politics of being the number one in the world? The problems that the idea of Fukuyama present to us is, we can view it from both, in two ways: from intellectual works that a lot of historians, and also to intellectual works that has been written too by Francis Fukuyama himself too, and events in the world as they gradually unfold themselves to us, make us to question this idea that liberal democracy, or the US is going to maintain a top position for a very long time. Because one thing we must also realize too is that despite the US taking the position now, we must not also forget that history too has also posited to us that there are many nations, there were empires, there were that stayed for a very long time. There were emperors that ruled for a very long time. There were people, there were countries. There was a time that the Persians were the one, they were the world power. There was a time that the Romans were the world power. There was even a time that the Israelites were the world power. There was a time that the Great Britain was the world power before it now got to the position of the United States. For instance, the intellectual work of somebody like Samuel Huntington, who in 1993, looking at the event in the world, looking at history, came out with his own piece of work and said, in his own book, which he titled The Clash of Civilization, and later he now renamed the book The Clash of Civilization and the Remaking of the World Order in 1996. Now, P. Huntington and Francis Fukuyama, they are philosophers and they are political. Samuel P. Huntington and Francis Fukuyama, they are contemporaries that talks about the politics of the world very well. I'm very much interested in these men because they really understand the direction in which the politics in the world is going towards. They understand it very well. In his book, that's Samuel Huntington, he suggested an alternative by taking an opposite position, saying that the end of the Cold War primarily indicates the end of conflict within Western civilization, and he posited a new conflict has begun with the post-Cold War era, an intercivilizational conflict. Now, that is for P. Huntington. In his own intellectual works, he was able to see that what the triumph is, the triumph that the Americans had in the in the victory they had in the Cold War was as a result of the war within the Western world, because it was a war. The Cold War was Russia, Soviet Union, and as we know now, Samuel Huntington will say a new war, a new conflict is now in humanity, the West and other civilizations. And when we also look at it too, history, when we look at events in the world too, we'll come to see that truly there are a lot of events that has helped to question the 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 the, the philosophy of Francis Fukuyama. Now look at some of this reality. For instance, the rise of China. China has come back into the politics of the world now. They are now waxing their muscle now. And China is not even interested in war. China is interested in getting all the countries in the world to be under them by giving them money, by borrowing them money. And in that way, they are able to control a lot, because the person that owns the economy is the one that holds power. It's not even military. Now, that's for China. Now, looking at the world politics again, Russia has now come back again to in world politics. We can see that China is now Russia. They are now back in world politics. Also, too, the COVID-19 also actually brought about a lot of a lot of questions, because the COVID-19 actually paralyzed the world. COVID-19 paralyzed economies. COVID-19 paralyzed world powers. COVID-19 slowed down a lot in the world. So COVID-19 is also another factor also that is helping to question the realization of this philosophy that the United States will remain in power. It is the last man standing. Now, having looked at some of these issues that in my own analysis of the world event in the world, I've come to discover that America being the world power, it's not something that is going to be there forever. It is going to come. There is going to be a time that they will no longer be the world power. The United States will not be the world power forever. The time will come that we have to shift. But if I'm asked of my own opinion, I being objective in my own way, I think I prefer a world that liberal democracy is the order of the day. As I go into this this topic, we are going to understand the reason why I prefer a world that liberal democracy is the ideal. Now, Francis Fukuyama, in his own philosophy, in his book, The End of History and the Last Man, he has presented a problem. And that problem is the United States will be in the game forever. And looking at the mechanism also that has been set in the world, it is also easy for us to follow the projection of Francis Fukuyama that the US is going to be there for a very long time, maybe forever, as the case may be. And that is why I titled this topic, I call it The Fall of the United States of America as the World Power, or as the most powerful nation on earth. The fall of the USA as the most powerful nation on earth. The fall of the United States is not, I'm not taking it from the literary perspective. I'm taking it from the perspective of Francis Fukuyama, which he presented in his book, that it is going to be the last man, that's the last form of government that the whole world is going to embrace. Now, looking at some other factors that has come into history, it has become clear that there are so many factors fighting, a lot of factors in the world now fighting the position of the United States as the world power. Francis Fukuyama, in his own work, he made his own explanation very clear. And his explanation is that with the success of the United States in the Cold War, because for Fukuyama, that was the only battle that the US were beset with that will give them the position as world power. So, having successfully defeated the Soviet Union, it is now clear that the United States is going to be there for forever. Francis Fukuyama, as we know him, was born on the 27th of October 1952 in Chicago. He has a Japanese background, as the case may be. He's a Japanese American. He was trained as a minister in the Congregational Church. He received a doctorate in sociology from the University of Chicago and taught religious studies. And his mother, Toshiko Kawata Fukuyama, she was born in Japan. And the family of Fukuyama, they have a great stake when it comes to Japan. But Fukuyama himself received his Bachelor of Art degree in Classics from Cornell University, where he studied political philosophy under Alan Bloom. He initially pursued graduate studies in comparative literature at Yale University, going to Paris for 6 months to study under Roland Barthes and Jacques Derrida. He studied political science in Harvard University, and he also earned his PhD in political science in Harvard University. There he wrote his thesis on Soviet threats to intervene in the Middle East. And Francis Fukuyama joined the global policy think tank RAD Corporation in 1977. And he has been affiliated with the Telluride Association since his undergraduate years at Cornell, an educational enterprise that was home to other significant leaders and intellectuals. And Francis Fukuyama has taught in a lot of universities, and Fukuyama himself has also presented something new, the end of history and the last man. And the United States of America is the goal of history, according to his own explanation. All that we have been waiting for right from when the world was created, is a government that is going to liberate humanity from suffering. And the United States of America, in the explanation and in the projection of Francis Fukuyama, the United States functions well in that role. Even Francis Fukuyama himself, after presenting this philosophy, he has also wrote a book also to also explain the path that the United States is going, that they are not following they are not taking their role as the goal of history properly, which might cause great danger. It might cause great danger for them. Might cause great danger for them. Now, what I want to bring out in this video is to explain to us some of the factors that questions the stand of the United States as the world power as it is now, because the United States at the moment has a lot of competitors. The competitors are much now in the game, in world politics. There are a lot of competitors now competing with the United States in that position that they have been holding for a very long time. And if care is not taken, these factors that I'm going to mention, if the United States do not take them very seriously, it has the capacity of robbing them of their position as the world power. One of them is worldwide liberal revolution. That's this factor is to support Francis Fukuyama's stand. Worldwide liberal revolution. Freedom and equality are natural concepts, something that all human beings, simply by being human, naturally want. This concept need not to be forced on the human person, because it is the goal of every human to strive to actualize them. And with this, we can say that liberal democracy is an objective idea and its globalization is feasible. So this is a support for Francis Fukuyama. It's a support for the stand of the United States of America as the world power, promoting liberal democracy. The extraordinary development in Eastern Europe enlarged only the latest and most dramatic phases of the commitment of people all over the world to liberal democracy. And from 1989 to the present, we have witnessed a great move of countries in the world from authoritarian government to democratic government. And also, we have also experienced from the time that Francis Fukuyama made this projection, we've also experienced in the world people protesting against unjust treatment, people protesting against dictatorship government. And we can see it, people also protesting against acts that are not attitude that are undemocratic. For instance, in our own era now, in our own time now, we can remember vividly well some of the protests that have taken place during the COVID-19, when George Floyd was killed. We saw how the whole world joined voice with the blacks in America, even both white. They joined their voice saying and kicking against attitude that are that does not embrace equality. We saw that when the blacks and the white, they came together, and the whole world, in the midst of the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, when everybody was warned not to even come outside, not to even, there should be social distancing. We saw that the killing of George Floyd, people actually did not listen to that warning of social distancing. But in order for the people to to raise a voice together, they spoke against the attitude of racism, which does not promote equality. And also too, we've also seen in the present too, the protests even in Nigeria as a country, for instance, where there has been protests against brutality of police, of the police to the citizen, which in a way is denying them of their fundamental human right. We've seen the NSAS protests. These are examples of worldwide liberal revolution. We've seen protests against dictatorship government in Africa, in Europe, in America, in Asia. We've seen protests. And we've also seen protests also against somebody like Donald Trump. When Donald Trump came into power, there is this continuous speech from him that we are undemocratic. And you saw the people actually fighting and saying, no, this is against what the United States of America stands for. This is against humanity. This is against what the human person stands for. So we can give it to Francis Fukuyama in this place because there has been a movement towards, there is a worldwide movement towards the path of liberal democracy, and thereby making Francis Fukuyama's conclusion valid and sound. Also, the last century has seen the promotion of democratic ideals of liberty and equality. This validates the examples I just explained now. During the long nightmare of the Cold War, leaders of the West had divided the world into two great camps, the free and the unfree world. No one would deny that today, freedom and equality in the world stand unchanged. They have become catchwords of every politician. They have also become the secular gospel of economic system. And today we are living through another explosive diffusion of the ideal of liberal democracy. If any survey is to be taken in the world today, we see that people will go for the government that give voice to the voiceless. No wonder it is said that no matter how worse a democratic regime may be, it is better than a military or an authoritative regimes. Since the Second World War, scores of countries all over the third world, Far East, have continued to embrace liberal democracy. To prove this, the survey by Freedom House in 2009 of the State House of Freedom shows that in the world, 89 countries are classified as free, 58 countries are partly free, and 47 countries are not free. Also, we have witnessed in this century the liberal revolutions in Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Tunisia, Syria. Also, the transition of government in Iraq and Afghanistan to democracy, which are indications of a world tending towards liberal democracy. And with only 5 countries of China, Laos, North Korea, Cuba, and Vietnam practicing communism, we can say that liberal democracy is the last man. So this point is to give it to the liberal democracy, to give it to Francis Fukuyama for his political projection, because truly we can say that people, all humans want their voice to be heard. So it is a natural thing in man to be liberated from every shackles, to speak when they are being dealt with. Another factor also that we can give it to Francis Fukuyama is the one that I call political stability. When I say political stability, what am I simply talking about? We observe that in countries that practice liberal democracy, there is protection of the right of the people. For instance, the United States of America, for instance, people prefer to go to the United States of America because this is a country that upholds the fundamental right of everybody, no matter who you are. That is the United States. That is what they stand for. That's what they uphold. Citizens in liberal democracy are less likely to suffer violent death in civil arrest or at the hands of their government. Yes, and that explains the reason why somebody like Donald Trump did not stay long there in government. This is because liberal democracy ensures the protection of the fundamental human right of its citizens and economic development. Fundamental human rights in Lord Bryce's classical work on democracy, he limited it to 3: civil rights, which means the exemption from control of the citizen in respect of his person and property. Number two, religious right are the exemption from control in the expression of religious opinions and the practice of worship. Number three, political right is the exemption from control in matters which do not plainly affect the welfare of the whole community as to render control necessary, including fundamental right of press freedom. In countries of liberal democracy, there is nothing like banning Twitter. There is nothing like banning Facebook, because these are medium where people express, where people speak their voices. There is no arena for controlling the people, because the people have freedom to express their fundamental human right. A country practicing liberal democracy grants its people the right to choose their own government through free and fair, periodic, secret ballots, and multi-party election based on universal and equal adult rights. No wonder Utitin said that liberty is the peculiar virtue of democracy. History also has it that there is less violence in America, Britain, France, and so forth, because citizens' rights in these countries are protected compared to countries like Republic of China, Nazi Germany, Iraq, Iran, Syria, even Nigeria in most African countries and so forth that practice dictatorship, where civilians' death ranges from genocide, homicide, holocaust to mass murder due to internal violence as a result of unstable government. Liberal democracy performs better in economics than authoritarian government. This is because they are likely to have market economies, which inherently tend towards economic growth and development over a long period of time. Countries of the G7 are the worst leading economy because they tend towards market economy. These countries are the United States, Japan, the four tigers of Asia, which to an extent affirms what Fukuyama says, that economic liberalism goes great economic performance. The survey by Freedom House on economic freedom between 1995 and 1996 shows that out of 80 countries that accounted for 90% of the world's population and 99% of the world's wealth on the basis of criteria such as right to own property, operate business, and belong to trade union, it found out that countries rated free generated 81% of the world's output, even though they had only 70% of the world's population. Also, countries with liberal democracy are likely to adopt and create foundation for long-term economic growth and development. Individuals will also make long-term investment when they are confident that their investment will not be expropriated, which is made possible by assurance that private properties will be protected and contracts will not be breached. The existence of law, independent judiciary, respect for rule of law and individual rights, security of property, and contract boost economic performance in a country, and this is readily made available in liberal democracy. This attitude, apart from being operational within a state, it is taken to the international scene. This is what the US is trying to do in the world today to ensure there is peace and maintenance of world order. When countries of the world practice liberal democracy, there will be fewer conflicts in the world because democracies do not go to war according to the democratic peace theory. So that's that for the factors that give more credence to what Fukuyama is saying. But now let us look at some other aspects of this whole thing. And this other aspect is the major factors now that are fighting the position of the United States as the world power in the world. First and foremost, let us look at the clash of civilization. This term is picked from the book of Utintin. To tackle Fukuyama's idea, Washington took an alternative stand and holds that the end of the Cold World War was to resurface another conflict in the world, an intercivilizational conflict. Washington presents 8 major cultures and civilizations that will clash with the Western civilization. And they are the Sikh, Japanese, Hindu, Islam, Orthodox, Latin America, the West, and Africa. From this culture, he sees Islam and the cultures of the Asia culture playing major role in the clash with the West. The Chinese, the Chinese, they are seriously at the forefront of this clash of civilization. The 21st century has witnessed great challenge also from Islam. Asia, the challenge coming from Asia, especially China, is rooted in economic growth and development. So we can see if countries of the world don't, if they are not practicing democracy and the government takes development, growth and development as a point of study, it will negate the position that give credence to Fukuyama's point, which is presented that in liberal democracy, people enjoy economic growth. So now, the from what we are reading now, the clash of civilization, Asia and Islam, basically they are there fighting. Asia challenges the challenge of Asia, especially China, is rooted in economic growth and development that has been very evident in the eastern part, while the Islamic resurgence is felt more in their number as the number of Muslims increases. Their members tend towards Islam as a source of identity. This explains what is happening in Europe today. In places like Germany, in places like France, in places like even the so-called Britain, these are stronghold of Islam. In short, Islamization is a war, is Islamization is clashing seriously with the Western civilization. They have slogan which include Islam is the solution. Slogan like the West is the enemy and infidel, and they must fight them. The clash Washington foresaw will come basically from issues that divide the West from other civilizations, and these issues are in the area where the West wants to continuously dominate. The West, that is the United States of America, wants to maintain its superiority through policies of non-proliferation and counter-proliferation with respect to nuclear, biological weapons, and the means of delivering them. Also, the West's zeal to pursue Western political values and institutions by pressing other societies to respect human rights as conceived in the West and to adopt democracy on Western lines and the capitalist economic system. And lastly, to protect the cultural, social, and ethnic integrity of Western society by restricting the number of non-Western admitted as immigrant or refugee. We saw this when Donald Trump was there. These clashes are already happening now in our very before as I make this video. On the 9th of September 2001, Al-Qaeda, an Islamic terrorist group led by Osama bin Laden, crashed 2 airplanes inside the Pentagon building in the United States of America. The attack really brought relief to the Muslim world because they were all very happy. Even here in the northern part, even in the northern part of Nigeria, where the deadly group of Islamic terrorists Boko Haram, now explode their bomb almost on daily basis. And Boko Haram, what are they also fighting? They are fighting against Western education. Everything West. Boko Haram against Western education, against Western civilization, everything that concerns the West. And if you are fighting against anything that concerns the West, also the bombs and the guns and the cars shouldn't be used. That is my own explanation of the ideology. And not just only do we have Boko Haram too, we've also seen the development of different groups, different terrorist groups, and Israel. We also keep claiming that they are fighting the interests of the West in, even though they acquire their own land, their ancestral land, the world still keeps seeing Israel fighting for their Western allies. With this, Islam told the West that they are set for them, and in return, the United States, with the support of its allies, launched back on Iraq and Afghanistan. And also, we also remember the attack also on the attack in Libya to fish out the terrorists. And we later got to know that Osama bin Laden was later killed by the United States in the year 2011. In 2006, we also saw the cartooning of Prophet Muhammad by a Danish magazine depicting him as a man of destruction, led to another clash between the West and Islam. We brought Muslims all over the world to fight the West. And the proliferation of and the acquiring of nuclear weapon, especially as the West has continuously controlled the ability of Iran to acquire nuclear weapon. So this of the ability of Iran to acquire nuclear weapon, these are issues that is really bringing concern. And also too, without even knowing, the Islam, they are growing in their number everywhere. They are growing in their number. The case of Boko Haram in the northern part of Nigeria is also traceable to this clash, because the Boko Haram now has also another group, also the ISWAP also. These are all fights against the West. But the problem with the Boko Haram is that sometimes we don't even know what they are fighting for, because sometimes when they attack, initially when they started their operation, they were very concerned about the Christians, and even now they are still concerned about the Christians. But sometimes when they carry out the attack, they don't really know whether they are fighting the Christians only or they are fighting the Muslim. We also have the present fights and the continuous fights by the US to stop Iran's uranium enrichment, which, though they have genuine reasons for embarking on such projects, is a further proof of the clash. The North Korea's rocket launch in disobedience to the US orders, and the North Korean nuclear weapon program, the Arab Spring in the Middle East, the continuous launching of rockets by Israel on Palestine, and Palestine also Hezbollah group and every other terrorist group fighting the Israelites. These are all elements of the clash of civilization. And also too, we also see the resurgence of great powers. They are back again to the game. The rise of Islamic fundamentalism, and the rest, they are all explanation of what we are talking about. The clash of civilization will continue in as much as there exist different civilization and cultures in the world, and the future is yet to see more clashes from the culture of the Orthodox, the Latin American, African, Japanese, and Hindu on the international scene, and which will continue to prove that liberal democracy the goal of history, the United States, may not, it's not going to be there forever because it has a lot of competitors. It has a lot of competitors. The next factor that is there trying to compete with the position of the United States as a world power is the return of authoritarian great powers. Arising from Huttitians' clash of civilization is the return of authoritarian great powers. With this, we can say that the victory of the West in the Cold War was exhaustion and not the triumph of the West. This is because the West reached its climax when it won the Cold War, and now it is falling like a line on a graph that starts from point zero, gradually gets to its apex, and starts falling back to zero. The perceived growth in economy, political, and military power of Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran are threats to the globalization of Fukuyama's idea of liberal democracy. These countries are gradually becoming models for countries around the world who want to become economic, political, and military efficient. For instance, what China is doing today. That is what China is not interested in fighting war with any country. But China is quietly, like a snail, creeping into different economies, creeping and grabbing wealth because he who holds wealth is the one that controls the world. You may not have enough military power, although we know that China has military power, but not as equal to that of Russia and that of the US. But every part of the world now, there is a China influence. Even during the COVID 19, what did we see during the COVID 19? We saw Jack Ma, Alibaba, the owner of Alibaba, he sent support to the US. And also Russia also did the same, sent support to the US. I'm still going to talk about the impact of the COVID-19 on the world as it is. There is no country in the world today, only those who have come to realize the game that China is playing. Only those countries have quietly told themselves not to get involved with the Chinese politics. Because any country that China has borrowed some amount of money to, such a country is indebted to such a country. You'll be indebted to China forever. And any international policy you are making, China must be an interest for you. You can't just allow it to go. The rise of China, North Korea, and the resurgence of Russia has made the objective generalization and directionality of history in favor of liberal democracy questionable. But from these countries, the threat of China is more feasible than the rest, which means I will focus on China. China practices a single party state government, by virtue of which it is a communist country. China is the second largest world economy. It has been able to reach this position because the areas where the West we are boastful of, it is gradually taking over those areas. These areas, as Huntington presented them, are ownership and operation of international banking system, control of all hard currencies, the world's principal customer, provision of majority of the world's finished goods, domination of international capital markets, exert considerable moral leadership within many societies, capability of massive military intervention, control of sea lines, conducting of most advanced technical research and development, control of leading edge technical education, domination of access to space, domination of the aerospace industry, domination of international communication, and domination of high-tech weapons industry. China is seriously competing with the United States of America in this area, and it has been said that in years to come, it may take over the position of the United States of America. No wonder Donald Trump really wasn't giving them the face that they need, the hand of friendship that they need. No wonder Donald Trump was doing all he can, all he could to stop the Chinese from even making the dollars, from even getting the dollars that will give them that position. Because when he has to place every tax on some goods that came from China to the US, this was what Donald Trump was looking into. Because if care is not taken, the goal of history, liberal democracy, may, may lose its position. What this means is that its system of government will eventually become the order of the day. But what could be behind the sources of China's position in the world? This is because China operates a political and economic system known as authoritarian capitalism. It sees its success as a product of their own civilization, and also China sees its current form of government or any political system mainly as a means to achieving larger national ends. This is where the major strength of this system lies. This is why it makes larger complex decisions quickly and makes them relatively well. And lastly, it has development of the country as its primary aim. It has development of the country as its primary aim. So give people development, give them everything they need. They will be engaged. And decisions are made very fast. They don't need the whole Senate to start deciding on matters that are of economic importance. They go into it straightforward and everything goes well. Now, another is the aspects of the theories of history. In philosophy, in philosophy of history, there is never the method on how historical events can be interpreted. But Francis Fukuyama made that error. The error he made was to hold the position of the philosopher Hegel, who holds that history is directional and universal, and it culminates in the realization of the spirit and reason in liberal democracy. History is not only interpreted directional in a directional way, as Fukuyama has pointed out in his thesis. History is also cyclical and economical. Cyclical interpretation of history was common among the Greek philosophers, who hold that history is a realm of endless reoccurrence leading back to a starting point and moves in a circle like season. This is the reason why Aristotle said that that there is no best government, that different governments come and go. Biblical interpretation is also known as the providential view. It is the view held by Christian medieval theologians and St. Augustine. They have their views. This view is of the belief that history is of divine purpose, that God is the one who determines the affairs of man and the type of government that should emerge at the end of history. This assumption is further supported by this view. Israel does not choose God, God chooses Israel. Economic interpretation of history rests on Karl Marx's dialectical materialism, which holds that the system of government that emerged at the end of history is pure communism. It is a system that rests on the view that historical progress has been based on class struggle in terms of production, distribution, and exchange. It listed the stages that societal development has passed into five, namely primitive communism, slave, military feudal group, capitalist, and the last, the classless society that is pure communism, where all conflicts will end. From the lesson of history, we have seen that history is cyclical. Humans are rational and they tend to behave in rational and they tend to behave in rational as well as behave irrationally, like historical models when confronted with their uncertain future. For the cyclists, humans are rational and also irrational. To say that all humans in mass, as Fukuyama says, will behave in rational way is not correct. People like Hitler, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, and even the upholder of liberal democracy, that's um, Donald Trump, will always exist. So we can see that history is not a one-way thing. It's not a rocket science, as the case may be. It has its own way. So another one that I want to look at is the impact of the coronavirus on the world, because coronavirus came and swept every ideologies away. Coronavirus came, and when coronavirus came, nobody remembered who is the world power. Nobody remember who is not the world power, because when the coronavirus came, ideology ceased. Liberal democracy ceased. The end of history and the last man ceased. During that, within year of anybody sending rockets to any country, within year of any within year of terrorists then, because at this time human being, we were all placed on the same pedestrian. And what is that pedestrian? We were all faced again with what Francis Fukuyama we call the struggle. There is that we were all struggling to live. That was our problem. That was what we were concerned about. And because we were all struggling to live, we all forgot about everything policies. We forgot about anything that existed. All humanity was interested in is to live again, to come back to life again, so that things can become normal. Even the most powerful government in the world, the goal of history, at this point in time, they lose focus. Everybody was just, let's just live. Never, apart from the decades before now, we in this century, we are seeing something different. A pandemic that came and swept everything away. A pandemic that rendered the powerful powerless. A pandemic that came that made unemployment, even in the US, to rise. A pandemic that came that small scale business could not thrive. A pandemic that came that people lost their job. A pandemic that came with re-inflation. A pandemic that came that the GDP forecast of many nations went down. A pandemic that came that even the United States of America became very confused. So COVID-19 is a, a leveler for everybody. So with COVID-19, hunger increased, medical care was not forthcoming, housing insecurity was on the high. What what have we? A lot happened during the COVID-19, the pandemic. During the pandemic, the wealth of the world became useless. Because the question we were asking, all these monies, all the power, Where did it landed us? So the COVID-19 actually humbled a lot of country, and many countries are still trying to get out of it because for the very first time, a lot of country went totally broke, and many countries have to start collecting money from their reserve, and many countries even started borrowing from China. China was there borrowing people money. So we can see that the 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 projection was on a stamp was placed on hold by the COVID-19. So COVID-19 has its role that it has played also in the idea of Francis Fukuyama, because many countries are still trying to come out of the lapses that they went through. The last one that I'm going to discuss is the problems in Africa. Fukuyama's idea of liberal democracy makes the West, especially the United States, to see itself as the agent and goal of history. This goes a long way to create the notion of superiority over all in their minds, thereby creating problems in the world in an attempt to make these values universalize. Although Fukuyama emphasized that if America must carry on this role of spreading democracy, it must be carried out in a multilateral manner, not unilateral. What we see today is a unilateral America who makes its own interest the interest of the world. This thereby creates lots of problem in the world, especially in developing continents like Africa. It is not news that the problem in Africa today is colonialism and post-colonialism. Colonialism is the product of idea like seeing a particular country as superior over the other. I cannot also forget what Hegel said when he said something about the absolute spirit, that the absolute spirit bypassed Africa, thereby leaving Africa in infantile darkness, which means Africans are irrational people. How can we attain liberal democracy when recent discoveries have shown that the United States and its allies support dictatorship and block democracy and development? Democracy is only supported when it contributes to the economic, social growth, and development of the Western nation. Even the United Nations does not help matters when because it is being run by the big players. The recent revolution in Libya, Tunisia, and Egypt tells us more. What then is the African fate? Yes, even if we are forced to embrace liberal democracy, even if we are forced to operate the way the Western world wants us to operate, how practical is it? Let me take Nigeria, for instance, as a case study. We practice liberal democracy in our own way theoretically. The first problem we even have in Nigeria is the lack of independence of the three arms of government: the executive, the judiciary, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. The judiciary cannot make independent judgments. The judiciary cannot even act as watchdog over the, the legislative or the executive. And the legislative cannot even control the power of the executive, because if that is done, if that is tackled, the executive will not release funds to support them. So it means at the end of the day, there is really nothing really happening. We are embracing a system of government that is theoretical. It is in book. Just like one of the senators will say in the House that the problem in Nigeria today is the constitution. And where is the constitution coming? The constitution is based mainly on what is being gotten from the what is gotten over there in the West. If Africans are allowed to run their own thing the way they want to run it, it's going to go a long way. But Africans keep copying because they want to pay allegiance to their colonial masters. They keep copying, and in an attempt to keep copying, they are not actually getting it right. For instance, the version of democracy practiced in Nigeria, it prohibits people from protesting. You can't even protest, like the recent protest that has happened in the country. For instance, the protest of the NSAS protest, the number of lives that went with the protests, that we are being denied that nothing like that happened. And if the people want to protest against the ill treatment of the government will send out the soldiers and the military. The military and the policemen will be on the street, killing anybody that wants to protest or to speak against the ill treatment of the government. So where is democracy when the people cannot express their fundamental human right, or in a situation whereby the means in which the people express their fundamental human rights, such as the social media that the people express their fundamental human right, if the people keeps talking about the government, what does the government do? They go to the government. We have to sanction those agencies, just like what happened in Nigeria, that because of the tweet of the president, Buhari was deleted. His tweet was deleted. What happened? Twitter was banned in the country. So if elements that people can express their fundamental human right, if those elements are not allowed to stay, then what happened? We are talking about the social media. Now, what about the media houses? The media houses now can't even speak the truth anymore. Because if they speak the truth, the government will come for them. So there is a whole lot. The problem is in Africa is not really making the Africa itself to understand itself. Colonialism was all about making Africans slaves to serve the industrial need of the West. And if you have lived in the US, England, France, and the liberal nations, one will testify to the high rate of racial discrimination against blacks in these countries. They are there. Even within Africans, there is still racial discrimination. Even in Nigeria, there is still tribal discrimination. It becomes clear that glorifying liberal democracy is it's really not workable, because we have come to discover that there is a lot of loopholes about liberal democracy, and we also have a situation in which the Africans themselves are fighting themselves. You have issues like Ghana must leave Nigeria, and we also have situation of Nigeria must leave. Xenophobic attitudes in South Africa is there, and today the situation has not changed. Africans or Africa is still under the control of the whites. We cannot do anything without them. They can stop our breathing because bulk of our goods comes from them. Our natural resources is often being mostly monopolized by Europeans and American companies, largely taking money out of Africa. When they want to lend African countries money, the interest they put is often too high that they have to pay for a long time. No wonder it is said that the economy of the whole of the continent of Africa combined together is not up to the economy of Germany, as big as Africa is. Africa is like a dumping ground, not just for used goods by the West, but also ideologies. They test run their ideologies here in Africa before taking it abroad. They determine how we are to run our government because it must be in favor of them, because our governmental ideologies come from there. Where then is the African ideology if it must practice Western liberal capitalist democracy for our continent to be prosperous? So From the discussion so far, liberal democracy, according to the idea of Francis Fukuyama, in which he projected is going to be the last man, you can see liberal democracy is a very good one if it is practiced the way it is supposed to be practiced, not theoretically, in practice. If it is practiced in practice, then it's a good one. But if it is practiced in 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 subjectivity, then it doesn't really go well. So I must thank you all who have taken out time to listen to this video on the fall of the United States of America as the world power. These are the reasons why the position as the world power of the US is being threatened almost every day. So if you have enjoyed this video, please do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, comment, and also share my videos. Thank you very much.